We are going to have one little switch up on the agenda tonight. The FY16 budget workshop is going to go first, and then we'll go to the other items. So, Dr. Houle, did you want to start with the workshop?
Alrighty. I know it's been a while since the committee has talked about the budget. We will start with some of the things that are going on. I'm going to hand you a copy of the summary sheet of where we stand. This is still kind of a moving target right now with regard to where the FY16 budget is headed, but this is the snapshot as of today. So before I get into the meat of the matter, I just want to talk a little bit about some terms that I'm going to throw around, and also just for the sake of the public so that everybody's dealing with a common vocabulary. We're going to be talking about three types of budgets tonight. The first being a level service budget, and what a level service budget means is that we take all of the fixed costs moving forward into the new fiscal year as if everything were going to remain the same. So we account for contractual cost of living increases, fixed cost increases, all of those kinds of things, and we come to what that number is and how it is different from FY15. Okay, so you'll hear me use the word level service a few times around. The second kind of budget we'll be talking about is a level funded budget, which probably speaks for itself. What happens if there is no increase in the FY16 budget over the FY15 budget? And we're going to use a new term this evening, and that's called a gap budget. And that's something we have discovered there is a gap between incoming revenue and expenses on the level service side. So we'll talk about what that means as well. Also, in the name of full transparency, we have sort of two perspectives on the budget. One is what we call an all funds budget, and that's all of the expenses and all of the funding sources that are used to fund the budget. And then we'll be talking about an LEA budget, which stands for Local Education Agency, which is us. Okay? So just so that if I start throwing these terms around, everybody knows what those mean. So that's kind of where we're at with this. So let's talk first of all about revenue sources, and this is a list of the revenue sources as we currently know them, and this is on the all funds side of the budget. So anything that's above that red line is considered, those are considered LEA sources or local sources to fund the budget. Anything below the red line is considered sort of the all funds. Those are additional sources of revenue that we get to do the work that we need to do. So you can see on the revenue side there is a $16,000 plus a little more increase in Chapter 70. That's the state funding that comes to public schools that's driven by the number of students who attend in any district. So we've had a slight uptick in the number of students when that count was taken, which would have been on October 1st. So that's showing that increase there. The local contribution number is a number that's driven by the Chapter 70 formula. Every municipality has a what they call a minimum net school spending money number that they must, or foundation number that they must contribute to the town's school. So school district. So the local contribution for this past year was just shy of $4.7 million, and as you can see, moving into FY16, the number is just shy of $4.8 million, or a $98,000 increase. There was an override that was passed a few years ago that's also part of this whole contribution, and that is carrying forward. Transportation is the number that is set aside for general regular education transportation. We are at the end of a contract and will be soon going out to bid. So on the advice of the town administrator, we left that number as it was because we don't know what a new contract will look like. So once we know that, that number may get adjusted, but as I understand it, the bid has not gone out yet, so I obviously want to review that before we move forward. And then the last number is special education transportation. We are required by law for any child who does not attend school in district or who requires special transportation in district to have special transport. The increase there is we would be asking the town for that to cover, per their contract, a 2% increase in the cost of transporting kids with special needs. Below the red line, that's where we get into funds that are in addition to the local or the all funds side of the budget. First is circuit breaker, which is state funding for extraordinary special education costs. So out of district tuitions, those kinds of things can be done, can be reimbursed by the state. You'll notice there's a decrease of $27,189 on circuit breaker. That's a result of 9C cuts that took place. 9C is the statute that the governor can, in mid-course, make adjustments to the state budget. And circuit breaker was decreased by 2% statewide. So that number has decreased for Granby in terms of where we're at this point. The school choice number is up a little bit. That's good news on the revenue side for us by $63,174, which means that we have more children choicing into Granby, so that's a good thing. Circuit breaker is spoken for by special education. School choice is a number that's a little more open-ended. It is supposed to offset the costs of bringing children in who are coming in by way of school choice. But it's a little more flexible in its use. Custodial revolving account, that's a revolving account that sort of takes in income for building use and that kind of thing. Basically goes back out for the purposes of trying to maintain wear and tear for the use of the buildings by outside groups. Athletic revolving is also, user fees, gate receipts, all of those kinds of things that help support the athletic program. So some of their expenses get charged to this account. So that's an account that we have. And then we're predicting right now a level funded amount of money for grants coming into the district. And again, that's part of the all funds formula. We don't have any real feel for particularly federal grants right now. It's pretty quiet in Washington. They are trying to reauthorize the law that allows for grants to be figured, and it's pretty quiet while all of that's going on. So that's sort of an assumption that we made. So what are the grants that we get? Well, we get an early childhood grant, and when the federal government giveth, they giveth with strings attached. So it's not like you get this money that, you see that big pot of money for grants and you think, oh, wow, that's great. Every grant has a purpose and it must be used, and we are audited on those purposes. So the early childhood grant that we get is a federal grant that funds mandated special education programs in our preschool. In our preschools, special education law requires that we educate children from the time that they are 3 years old until they are 22. So our preschool programs are what's known as integrated preschools. They have the children who are 3 and 4 who have special needs, and they also have then peer role models, regular education students in with them. So that early childhood grant help funds our preschool programs. The Essential School Health Service Grant is a state grant that helps to support nursing services. When that grant first came out several years ago, every district got a high level of funding, but it was with the understanding that the local district would begin to contribute more and more and more. So we're seeing that sort of balance in a different kind of way. The Kindergarten Enhancement Grant is the state grant that supports full-day kindergarten. That was a victim of 9C cuts a couple of months ago by the governor. A 22% cut, or translates to $7,140. And that cut remains in the governor's proposal moving forward to FY16. Public Law 94-142 is the federal special education law, and there's a federal grant that comes our way to support special education programs. We also get a special education improvement grant. It's not a whole lot. but it's a state funding program that helps us enhance our special education offerings. It cannot be used to fund existing programs. It has to be used to fund some sort of enhancement. Title I is a federal grant that's been around since the 1960s. It provides extra support in reading and math for low-income students. It must be used in that way, and it must be used to supplement, similar to the Special Education Improvement Grant, it must be used to supplement what's going on in the regular classroom. It can't be used to supplant or replace what's going on in the regular education classroom. And the last grant we receive is called Title IIA, and that's a federal teacher equality grant. Most of it is to support professional development and the improvement of teacher practice. So those are the 6 grants that help fund us, or 7 grants, whatever they are, that help fund the district on the all funds side. So that's part of that grants number that you saw on your overview sheet. Okay, so what's new since the last time you talked about this? Well, the first thing is the issuance of a cherry sheet. And for those of you who wonder what the heck is a cherry sheet and where did that name come from, we used to get them in the mail, and they used to be printed on cherry pink paper. So that's how come they got called cherry sheets. Well, they come electronically, and they're no longer cherry pink, but we still call them that. We have a fond association, I guess, with the name or whatever. There are 2 parts to the cherry sheet. Right now, what we have in front of us is the governor's budget. We have not heard from the House or the Senate yet, although the professional organization I belong to, the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, has testified in front of a joint Ways and Means Committee of both the House and Senate and said that what the governor has put out there for education is not enough. Whether that will change anybody's mind or not will remain to be seen. But there are 2 sides, and there are 2 sheets of paper. One is the receipts. These are the things that the state says that they will give to Granby. And you can see that in FY15 it was a little over $6.2 million. Now we're talking a little over $6.3 million, or a difference of $45,000, give or take, there. So you think, oh great, we're getting more money. Then you look at the assessments side, which is the second page, and these are all the charges that the state makes of the town. And as you can see, it was $995,000 last year. Now we're a little over $1 million this year. So the difference in the receipt in the assessments is $63,911. If you look at the net, which is, take away the assessments, look at the receipts, the difference suddenly drops to now only $18,927 more this year than last year. So that's one thing we know. Where this will land when all is said and done is anybody's guess, because obviously it has to go through the House Ways and Means. The next iteration will be the House 2 budget, which is what the House side of the legislature will pass. It will then go into the Senate Ways and Means Committee and come out of the Senate, and hopefully that'll happen sometime in June or late May, and then they won't quite agree. There will be a conference committee, and they'll harangue over it and come up with a number that everybody's happy with, and then the governor will hopefully by June 30th or July 1st sign something so we know what we're looking at for funding. But right now, the assumption is based on the House 1 numbers because we don't know anything else. The past few years, what's finally come out in the end has been just maybe a hair higher than the governor or a hair lower, so I think making this assumption right out of the gate is an okay thing to do. What else is new? This morning, I received from the town administrator the what's known as the in-kind contribution for next fiscal year. And here's a copy of what I received from him today. There are certain things in terms of what towns contribute to schools that they get to sort of dictate, get to count things that is not direct revenue to us, but things that they spend on our behalf. So that's what this sheet is about. And so you can see that for FY15, the in-kind contribution from the town, which is not hard dollars but hard services, was $1,756,487. The FY16 projection as of this morning is just shy of $2 million, or $224,488 increase. So that means less hard money coming our way, more service-oriented. And you can see that there are things from administrative services that the town does for the schools that can be charged off to us. School resource officer is in there. Operation and maintenance of plant is mowing some of our property and working with the fields and sweeping up sand, etc. Employee retirement programs, what gets paid in to the state with regard to that. Insurance programs, it looks like the insurance is going to go up about 2%, health insurance, which really is not a bad increase, give or take. Is that right, Arch? Yeah. Okay. There's some life insurance costs that the town bears that they say it's their in-kind contribution to us. Retired teachers, non-teachers health insurance, things that have to do with Medicare and FICA that get paid on behalf of the employees, the town's insurance that covers our, property and liability and all of that business. And then the tuition numbers you can see are down there for charter school assessments and charter school reimbursements. To offset that, special education and school choice assessment, because the school department gets the revenue from school choice coming in, but the town has to pay for school choice going out. So that's the in-kind number. So that's the number that adds some interest, shall we say, to this particular budget discussion. So I just want to take a minute to talk about some budget scenarios. When you look at the FY15 budget, this number was originally a little bit lower, but you just had a special town meeting vote to add $85,000 to the appropriation, so that number is embedded into this total. When we do level service, which means cost of living increases and fixed costs and all of those things, we come up to this $12.8 million number, which is a difference for the local side, not the all-fund side, but the difference on the local side is an additional $566,799 that has to be done. So that's a 4.62% increase to do a level service number. Now I will tell you, embedded in this level service number is already about $92,000 in net reductions. And these are some staff positions that, because of some declining enrollments, would not necessarily be needed. We're probably looking at a reduction of one section of kindergarten based on what we know from their registration. We're looking probably at a reduction of a high school position, and we're also looking at a reduction in time for an art position at this particular point in time. So that's approximately what we're looking at in terms of reductions, and that's just to be at level service. That's not even going anywhere beyond that. If we had to be level funded, which is this number here, which matches that number up there, we'd obviously have to take this $566,799 off the table, which would reduce this number by that 4.62%. So that's this number of cuts. Now, what we have discovered is that there is a gap between this level service number and what we show for revenue coming in, which is $12,180,170. When you take those two numbers and you pull them apart, the gap between what's incoming or projected incoming and what would be level service is $645,289, or this would be equal to a 5.35% cut. So that's where we stand right at the moment with the budget. So we have arrived at this number. What I would like to suggest to the committee is that between now and next week when we meet again, that we think about the administration coming back to you with some scenarios played out. What would it look like if we were level funded, and what would it look like if we had to completely close the gap, which is less than level funded, between revenue and expenses.
Okay.
So I don't know how the committee feels about that.
Well, always looking at these numbers, every year it's shocking.
Mm-hmm.
The
Pretty
last
sober.
several years, but not knowing the makeup of these numbers of where the cuts would be felt is really hard to gauge. So I think it would be, really prudent for you and the administration team to come back with recommendations of both the level funded and the gap budget. I think especially the gap budget, because based on what you have told us tonight, that's a number that there's a good chance we'll be shooting for.
And I will tell you, it will be primarily in the form of personnel, because there really is no place else to take it from. The supply lines and those kinds of things are bare bones minimum to run the operation of the district. So we're looking at personnel, and this will be huge. This will be huge.
But I think we have to start somewhere. So
Right.
if you at least come with a list of ideas and perspectives that we can actually see it visually and the impact to the district academically, I think that will really generate a lot of conversations.
And I already alerted the administration that probably Thursday afternoon we would have a date with Destiny together. So they're prepared and ready to go. So we can play those two numbers out if that's the pleasure of the committee, and come back to you with what they mean by next Monday.
Where was the big difference? I don't have last year's in front of me. Where was the big difference in the in-kind services of those 8 little categories? Where was the big difference of $200,000?
I would have to look at the detail of this particular sheet, Jim.
I can answer that.
Okay. Archie can answer that.
Primarily in the charter school assessment and the school choice assessment. That's the majority of the increase from the town.
Because we're having more kids leaving us?
Yes.
Yeah.
So with that, Archie, so it's $310,000. So are we saying it's roughly about 55 students that are leaving for school choice?
Yeah, approximately.
Yep.
Do we have, and do you know the grades? Because these are not students going to private schools. These are ones going to other public schools.
I don't have those with me. I do know that the principals have a lot of those numbers, but we certainly can bring them back to you next week.
Because it would be great to revisit that, at least what age groups we're losing, whether it's the high school level or if it's more at the elementary school level.
I did take a look at a 10-year enrollment trend, and I can also bring that to you, and there does seem to be a drop-off from a little bit of a drop-off into 7th and then another drop-off again in 9th.
Okay.
Seems to be the trend, but I can bring those numbers back for you next week as well.
Okay.
But we're going to need those numbers anyway, because that's going to determine where, if any, the cuts are going to come from.
Yeah.
Right, and certainly that's what the administration's going to work from.
Right.
Yep.
So I just want to, Emery, Dean, Marie, and Jim, are you okay with the admin team coming back? I guess that's next week already.
Yeah.
With ideas and brainstorming and stuff like that on those numbers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
And my suggestion would be just adding to what you just said, Mike, not necessarily being locked to any number over there, just from an educational perspective, just whatever other ideas, just to keep the integrity of the educational system here. Whatever suggestions you have, we should have everything on the table so that we can have a good, productive conversation. Obviously, you have some numbers out there that we will need to discuss, and some of them some of the cuts that you're talking about will unfortunately need to be discussed and potentially become reality. But we would like to know
Sure. No, we'll give you a detailed list.
all the scenarios so that we can assess the quality of education with your help as we're making our decision.
And you know,
and I think we're all probably singing from the same sheet of music, to use my other life as an analogy. But I think that the last place we want to touch is the classroom. So whatever we can do to not touch the classroom first is what we want to do. But I have a feeling, particularly in the GAP budget, we may be looking at touching the classroom. So, but
I'd like to hear anybody's idea that they've ever had, ever. Anything.
okay.
and so you know, part of this, you know, there's always a risk involved because I see that, you know, as we make the cutbacks to meet the needs of the overall budget, there's also the chance that our school choice outgoing will go up. Because we will not, in some people's minds and eyes, we will not be meeting the needs of their students and children. So
I understand I understand the dilemma the town is in, but this number is really a frightening number because it's not even keeping pace with last year's number. It's a decrease over last year's number. Or over this year's number, I should say.
But once you come back and we, with recommendations, we can discuss as a school committee on how we want to approach. And
the other thing I'd like to suggest before I pull out the next rabbit out of my hat is that, and since the two chairs are sitting here in the room, is that at some point in the discussions, and the town administrator has requested that we have a number for him by May 1st. So this is going to be a busy month. But whether or not, and I don't know whether Mr. Bale and John want to speak to this, but you know, maybe having one of those meetings be one where the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen are invited to sit down and we hash all of this out together. Because at the end of the day, when you take off the school-specific revenues, it is one giant pot of money that we all have to figure out how to share. And I think that if we can have an honest and open discussion with the other two boards, or at least representatives thereof, I think that makes some sense, so that we do that before we arrive at a number that you need to vote on, which will have to be by the end of the month. So, not to put you on the spot, gentlemen, but...
the select board will be fine with it. At least one representative will come, if not all of us.
I think not only is a good idea, but it's that's the way we should do it anyway, so that we should have the interaction before we come up with our numbers, just to bounce it off of each other and just see where we stand.
So we have to, as a school committee, we have to understand these numbers.
Which
and
we will
what-
start doing
and the
next week.
impact, right.
Yeah, exactly.
And John, are you open to that too?
Yeah, no, we've always had conversations in the past. Matter of fact, if you want to make some Xerox copies, I can hand out to you something right now and take you through a little bit of how the Finance Committee views school expenses, and to give you some numbers to think about.
I'll meet the copies, yeah.
That's what I thought.
And so while that's happening, did you want to pull out the next rabbit?
I certainly do, because we have an extremely immediate need that you need to be aware of. And oops, I went too far. A weekend ago, we had a roof leak in this building, which compromised 4 classrooms. And as you can see in the first picture, we actually had some ceiling tiles that fell on desks. Fortunately, it happened over a weekend, and there were no students present. You can see where ceiling tiles have fallen apart, where there's water on the floor. And this last shot shows a pretty brittle hole in the membrane roof. This is a 25-year-old roof. Membrane roofs usually don't last any more than 20 years. So I think what we're beginning to see is the precipice of a possible failure of the roof on this building. And I think it has to be addressed yesterday. To be honest.
So 2 years ago, we had an article on the floor, and we pulled it with the understanding that with $30,000 to $40,000, we're going to see if we can get some life out of the existing roof, and that probably has come and gone.
Yes.
So I guess as a school committee, we're going to need to approach to see about having an article put on for some sort of, whether it's the whole roof, repairs, or something.
I'll be honest with you, putting repairs on is like
Yeah,
putting a
I
Band-Aid
know.
on an open wound right now.
Because we've already...
Because if you notice right around this little hole, you can see this white area here. What that is what they call delamination. The roof is actually starting to pick up from where it was adhered to the roof. And when that starts to happen, you're ready for a roof failure. So, if it is, again, the committee's desire, I will set in motion a plan to try and get a number prepared.
So based on the assessments that you're going to be receiving, again, everything should be discussed.
Yeah.
One, number two, based on that last picture that you pointed to, do you have any concerns as far as safety?
I think this was driven more by snow load than anything at this point. And as a matter of fact, I asked the director of Buildings and Grounds to go up on the roof when it looked like it was going to rain heavily last week, and just check to make sure. And it looked like what they did to patch things was going to hold. So I think in terms of student safety, I think we're in an okay place right now, but I would not want to gamble on this another winter. Particularly if we have a winter like we just had, because I don't believe that it'll hold, to be honest.
How long do you think it would take to get some bids, some quotes?
Well, we'd have to do something about trying to get somebody with an engineering background to get up there and see what's what. So I'll reach out to Marquette and see CMS has some consultants to do this kind of work, see if we can get somebody up there sooner rather than later to take a look around and to give us an estimate of what it might cost to put a roof on. But this is urgent, and, you know, in my mind, it's a student safety issue on top of it. I mean, John was great that Monday morning when he came in and discovered it, moved kids around, got kids out of harm's way. We lost some computer equipment, and it's not equipment and those losses, we have a deductible on our insurance, and it's not enough to cover the deductible, so we'd be on the hook for that.
Do you know what the losses are?
David gave me a couple of quotes, and I don't have the numbers in my head, but I can get those for you later.
Sorry, Brian.
Thank you. Dr. Hull, is there a way to look into, I don't know, MSBA, or if there's any kind of way to get help with
I did look at the emergency provisions for MSBA to think whatever, and this is not severe enough to do the emergency statement of interest route. It would be basically if we literally had to take kids out of the building and put them somewhere else, then that would be an emergency type. They did investigate that, so unfortunately.
Okay, so you'll use some initial research then?
Yes.
Okay. And you'll come back to us with that also.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And those 4 classrooms that you mentioned, which section, which part of the school are we talking about?
John knows better than I do, so I'll let you answer that question,
Sure, no
John.
problem. They were actually right here, rooms 106, 107, and directly above the 2 science rooms, 211 and 212, that were compromised. We had ceiling tiles that basically came down, puddles on the floor. We had to relocate classes here to the media center, and it was just a messy situation this time last week. It was actually on Monday when we came to school and we found out that we had we had a situation that we had to handle first thing.
John, did you want to speak to your sheet now? Did you want to come up here, or?
It's up to you. I can speak from back here. I can come up there.
Why don't you come up, because we have the mics and it's just easier. Thank you, and thanks for bringing this.
Thank you for inviting me. You sit up here? Or?
Sure.
Nope. Oh, that's it. So.
I put together some figures to give you a bit of an illustration of how the Finance Committee looks at school expenses in the town. And I've got some other things to tell you, too. And a lot of the figures here are similar to the ones that you've seen in a different form up on the sheets that the superintendent showed you. And some of them are also figures which you can see on the cherry sheets. As a matter of fact, before we get to this, if you look at the cherry sheet and look at page 2 of the cherry sheet, one of the things I think to keep in mind is of that, these are the assessments, the things that get assessed, that $1,059,000. If you look at these are almost all school expenses. The $441,193 is retired teachers' health insurance, which is not actually assessed against the school budget for reasons I'll tell you in a minute. The figures at the bottom, special ed figures, the school choice sending tuition, and the charter school sending tuition are all school figures, and they're part of what the town expenditures are. The $1.9 million, they're included in there.
Yep.
So they're part of what comes through on that cherry sheet. The $62,974 is not a school-related expense. It's regional transit for the town. On the page that I handed out, Finance Committee tends to start at the top and work its way through to the bottom line. On the school figures for this year, the minimum school spending required is this $9,347,796. And that figure is in a number of places. I think I took it off of the Department of Education website that says what the expenditures have to be. And then from that, the first thing we do is subtract the town contributions, which is the $1.98 million, leaving minimum net school budget that has to be voted on in the town as the $7.4 million roughly. And then the additional school budget is the amount that is voted on as the override, the $305,794, which we voted in 2004, fiscal year 2004. And I think the school committee members probably know this, but not everyone does. When this money was voted as an override, it was voted, according to the laws of Massachusetts, it's voted as an amount which for 1 year is required to be used for the purpose for which it was voted. After the first year, it becomes part of the town's general coffers and can be used for anything that's wanted. The Finance Committee has always had no problem with saying that we should include that year after year in the amount that goes to school, but that's not a legal requirement. That gives a total voted school budget of $7,672,658. There are also some non-voted expenses that the school has. The school choice pass-through is the $771,000 that was shown you on the board. There's also a school lunch pass-through, a small number. I actually don't have the figures for 76. It wasn't on for 16. It wasn't on the website. I'll show you what the 15 figure was. That's about the order of magnitude.
What is that, John? The lunch pass-through is.
It's part of what comes in from the state.
Okay.
And it used to be on the cherry sheet every year. And they've started taking it off the cherry sheet because it's a straight pass-through and can't be used for anything else except for the specific programs. Much like the grants.
It's the federal, really free and reduced reimbursement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Judy had a good analogy with the grant money that you're given. It comes to the school, but it's restricted in its use and can't be used for anything except for what the grant is given for.
Okay.
So it's a small amount of money.
Yeah.
But in the past years, we've always had to vote on it because it comes through the cherry sheet. Apparently, we may not have to even vote on it this year. It may just come on through directly. So this is $8,450,006, and I think that's what we would think of as the school budget. This also excludes the grant money and the custodial revolving account and the athletic revolving account. So those things are not included in these figures at all.
Okay.
And that's what we would say would be the minimum required if you include the $305,000 in the override money. That's what is the minimum that'd be required that the schools spend on education for the year. And that money is voted at the town meeting. The budget that the Finance Committee presents to the town meeting has that figure as a minimum that we have to have for a school budget for the year. There are additional expenses that are incurred on behalf of the school, and I've listed them in the next section on the additional voted school expenses. There's the town contribution to schools of the 1.98 that's spent on behalf of the schools. That's subtracted straight off the overall expenses. That's the in-kind expenses. Yes. And those are all detailed on the pages that you were handed out. The school transportation expenses in fiscal year 2015 were $935,000. I think it's $922,000 that you have on the figure for this year. That's again a figure which is voted on and is used for transportation expenses, split up like you have between the sped expenses and regular expenses, and can't be used for anything else. Pathfinder expenses are going to actually have a slight decrease this year because Pathfinder has put off doing a few things that they might otherwise do. And then there's the retired teachers' health insurance, which is a big dollar amount, which is on the sheet. Now, the retired teachers' health insurance is interesting. In virtually every city and town in the Commonwealth, the retired teachers' health insurance is an expenditure that's on the in-kind contributions of the town. So that the $2 million that's up there right now would be $2.4 million as an in-kind expenses, and would come right off of what the school expenditures have to be. Apparently, when this law was put on the books and this whole computation system was set up, the accounting in the town was not handed in correctly. The line that said, "Are you paying for any retired teachers' health insurance?" was marked no instead of yes, and so that Granby then didn't get to put this into the in-kind expenses. And the law was set up so that they've never changed the formula. There's been some talk about it in some years, but they never in fact changed the formula. But right now, that money is spent by the town, but isn't getting charged to the schools. In other towns, it would be charged to the schools. So there's a bit of a direct subsidy every year, which isn't voted on. So that brings us to about $12.1 million of these budgeted and voted expenses. There are additional expenses that are kind of lurking in the background a little bit. It's about $250,000. And these come from the town's free cash position. The free cash position, which was voted on our free cash as of June 30th, 2014. So it's the free cash which is now available for the rest of this fiscal year and for future budget years as long as we put it into stabilization fund. Includes a number of offsets to what we would otherwise have available funds. And some of the offsets include receivables, overdrawn accounts, and deficits in some accounts. And I've listed a number of them there that are school-related. There are some other accounts that are not school-related, but this is a direct reduction in the free cash that the town would have available to spend on other things. It's money which has either been spent on the schools or hasn't been collected yet. But in fact, the town never gets a chance to vote on this money because it comes straight off the free cash calculation. A bunch of this has been sitting here for a few years. Some of it is new. The school choice, I think, is a new big item which occurred this year. The school lunch circuit breaker has had this some of these deficits in the past, but from the finance committee point of view, it looks like additional money which has really been spent on behalf of the schools. So that brings the total up to about $12.3 million of total expenses for the schools. But now back to the budget. I think that the budget figure that the Finance Committee looks as the baseline budget figure is the $8.45 million. And that it's not a comparison to last year or any other year. It's just taking a look at what the requirements are that we really have to have for a school budget for this year. And that the voted school budget in the town floor will be the $7.67 million. Now, how much should the budget be? That's a different question. And it's been a different question every year. For the last, maybe 11, 12 years now, the guideline has been the minimum required plus the $305,000 override. And that's been adhered to in most all years. There are additional capital expenditures for the schools, warrant articles that are voted on in town. There have been some big ones and been some small ones. In the last 3 years, for the fiscal year that we're in, there were no additional operational monies voted. But 2 years ago and 1 year ago, there was an additional amount voted each year when Superintendent Rodriguez came in. In her first year, she understood that the town was trying to get to the minimum plus the override amount. And she asked the Finance Committee if we could give the schools an additional $200,000 roughly for that year. And 200, 300 first year.
It was 200 and something.
Yeah.
It wasn't 3, but it was like I think like 270.
270 or so.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And it was for our special ed.
Yeah, there were some real difficulties.
Right, students that we didn't account for that had moved into the district or whatever.
And then 2 years ago, that was reduced to 100,000. Ms. Molina said that the school committee was working on reducing it back to the minimum plus 305, and thought that we'd do it in 1 year. It turned out to take 2 years to do that, so that there was no additional amount voted last year. So again, that's why we're going to use that as a baseline and have discussions starting at that point.
So, and the figure is the 7.6. Is that the one in front of us that you have? That's the one.
8,450.
That includes the 8,450 includes the school choice money, the 7,000.
So that's the figure we're looking at. You're looking at right now.
Yeah, but again, that figure would not go into the town budget. The $771,000 never goes into the town budget.
That's a direct revenue to the school district.
Just like the $400,000 in grants, $500,000.
And the circuit breaker is a direct.
Yeah, that goes into, it comes in a different route into the schools and is not voted on. The amount that would be voted on is more like the $7,672,000. And let's see. Last year.
And what was the total voted on last year? At town meeting, right? That's what you're talking, John?
Yeah, at the town meeting. At the town meeting, we voted on a minimum net school budget of $7,477,000. The additional override of $306,000. There were capital warrant articles of $205,000. And then we voted on the the general government for schools doesn't get voted on specifically as that amount. It comes in within the budgets of the schools. The $935,000 transportation was voted on, has to be voted on specifically at town meeting. And the $341,000 for Pathfinder, $342,000 for Pathfinder, these are rounded figures, was voted on at town meeting. In addition to that, the retired teachers' health insurance is voted on as it's lumped in with the health insurance costs of the town. We vote in a line item on the health insurance.
Hey, John, can you educate me more on the additional non-voted school expenses? So, like school lunch, circuit breaker. So, it's roughly $250,000. So,
these are not. They're not voted on because the town never gets a chance to see the money and decide whether to spend it or not. But what it is that the free cash that we would have available to the town would be about $250,000 higher, except that there are deficits in these accounts. These accounts have been overspent from what was been the approved amounts. And so basically the state will not certify that we have that money to spend on other things because it's owed to these accounts.
okay.
But it's never really cleared off until the town does something. The town has to either work with whoever department it is has over expenditures in the amounts, and there's more than the schools that happens to, and take it specifically out of a budget for a year, or probably has to vote on doing something to clear it off the books.
Okay.
But otherwise, it sits there as an amount which is kind of owed. And has been expended or will be expended, but isn't really voted on by the town.
Yeah, I was well aware of the school lunch one, and I know...
Of that much money, though? $83,000?
I didn't know it was that high, but I knew that we did have
Been a
one
couple
of...
years. I don't have the
one for
figures
school
from this one.
lunch, but some of these other ones,
School choice, $90,000?
you know, I was not aware of. So these are...
These are the first I'm seeing these
Yeah,
figures,
these
so I'd
are,
have to do some
and that's why I'm
research on
asking.
this.
These are kind of a surprise.
But for
Yeah,
instance,
and the first I saw of them was in March.
Okay.
But like circuit breaker would be, you know, like we don't get the amount that the government tells us they're going to give us for those extra costs, so then it becomes a deficit because we now didn't get the money that we thought we might get because it's never the percentage they say they're going to give us. I would assume.
I don't know the details. I think that's something that you can find out.
Yeah,
the school.
circuit breaker is they project an amount, but they also tell you it's a percentage of the extraordinary
Right.
costs that
Yeah.
you can have refunded. So
Then they lower the percentage.
right, and then that's part of what
They-
happens is the percentage gets lowered, and you know,
They lower the percentages. Plus, the other thing is that the figures are all projected, and as the actual comes in, they actually spend cash.
Right.
Right.
yeah,
So there could be some deficits rising from that.
right, or
Again,
some
yeah.
surprise placement
Yeah.
that we weren't expecting. You know.
And teacher quality and academic support, those would be grants that were overspent here on behalf of the school department then?
Jim, I just don't know that.
Yeah, so how do we get that detail, John? So how do we drill down into finding out, the details of these accounts?
We'd have to work through the town accountant, who Mr. Martin was doing.
Okay.
To get the details on that.
Okay.
And again, I brought this up not to make it necessarily part of this budget.
No, but it's
discussion,
good to know.
But just so it's part of the things that you're aware
Yeah,
of.
yeah, no,
And
I think...
we've never really tried to get a payment for these in any one particular year in budget, but it's something which has to get worked out in terms of the operation.
Okay.
It's the sort of thing that this is not a one-year problem. The entire amount is not something that was spent in last year,
Right.
as far as I know. Although the school choice money could be the exception to that. That could be something just for 1 year as a account. If something becomes a yearly expenditure, then we really have to pay attention to it, because if it's a yearly expenditure, then it's got to be accounted for on a yearly basis, or else the money just keeps piling up.
Okay.
So it's just something to be aware of.
Yeah, no, it is.
But John, in your scenario of the total voted school budget, on your paper, 7,672, that's already, at this point, less than what the town voted on last year in the same line. Looked like it
Yes.
was over 7,700 last year, right?
Yes, it was about 7,783.
So this already is even less than.
Yes, and that's because the elements of the town in-kind expenses have gone up by a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
So would that be the number that we would see in the warrant? Which one, if we were voting for it today, what is the number that would be on the warrant based on these numbers?
That would be the 7,672,658.
Okay.
What would be
In the
two?
budget.
There would be one, the 305, right? Or would it be a total? Do we vote on that one separate still? or-
Actually, with the school budget, there's a slight difference from the rest of the budgets in town. For the rest of the budgets in town, the town votes an amount for compensation,
Yeah.
and votes an amount for expenses, and then votes that total amount. But the vote on the compensation and the vote on the expenses is an important vote because other town departments are not allowed to take any money which has been voted for an expense account and move it into a salary account, and not allowed to take any money voted in the salary account and move it to pay for expenses.
That's right.
The schools is the one exception for that. We show it as two line items, compensation and expenses, and then the bottom line. But for the schools, it's only the bottom line that counts. The schools, in fact, have the freedom to take and move money around during the year between the amount that was previously budgeted for salaries and the amount budgeted for expenses.
Yep.
So it's the bottom line. That's the figure that appears in the printed booklet that's in.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, I have
for
one more clarification, Mike. John, the last section, again, going back to the additional non-voter school expenses, did you say that is coming out of free cash?
It reduces the amount of free cash that we have available. The way it works is that in February, the state looks at their books, and they take a look at all the money that's come in, all the money that's going out, and we always try to make a slight underestimation of the income that's coming on in. And the reason is that if you recall, every year for the past umpteen years, we have special town meetings in the springtime and vote for things that come up that were completely unanticipated that need money. And one example was the money that was voted, the $85,000 for the schools that was voted because of the equipment problems, basically, that you had. There's really no way to anticipate that, no way to include that in budgets. So that free cash is often used for that, and then we often try to put free cash into stabilization funds, and then pay for capital equipment out of stabilization funds, so you get a better handle on what you're doing with capital equipment that way.
So that amount will be voted on separately at the town meeting on top of the 7
This won't be voted on at all.
at all?
This
No
won't be
free
voted on at all.
cash?
What'll happen is that there will be some other special town meetings before the end of the year. And free cash will probably be used as the revenue item to pay for any expenditures that come up from that. And then, if there's anything left over, what we would do at the annual town meeting is take the rest of the free cash that we have been voted on by the state and vote to put it into stabilization funds. And there's a technical reason for that too with the budget. If we don't vote to do something with it by June 30th, the end of this fiscal year, then we lose access to it. The money's still there, but we actually lose access to it. You can't spend the money. But as long as we vote to keep it in the town somehow, which we do by putting it in the stabilization funds, then we will be able to use that money for whatever it is we want when we want to vote for it for next year. But it is $250,000 less than it would otherwise be. Well, there's more than here. There's about $300,000 less than it would otherwise be because of these accounts which the state has said have been overexpended. Does that answer?
It does. What I was wondering is, because you mentioned stabilization fund and everything else, I was wondering whether we need 2/3 vote to take that amount out of the stabilization.
No.
Okay.
It's one of the things that sort of bypasses the calculations for this year.
Thank you.
And again, the key thing to think about in that is that to the extent that these deficits are a result of one-time expenditures, they're not as troublesome as if the accounts start building up because of a constant set of expenditures that go into it, from our point of view.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, and I hope we didn't put you on too much of a spot tonight.
No.
And thanks for coming with this.
John, just another question.
numbers.
Sure. If you saw Drew's earlier presentation, and we've got to look at this more carefully, but it seemed to me that this would become some pretty drastic cuts to try to meet these figures. So where's the other money available within the town that the town voters could possibly vote to give to the schools? Where would it come from?
If expenditures are thought of as things which are going to be needed permanently, then you need a permanent source of income. And the only permanent source of income is overrides. Trying to pull $600,000 out of other budgets is just about impossible. The reason is that if you look at the budgets, the only budgets that are anywhere near that size are the police department.
Please, yeah.
And you couldn't pull $600,000 out of the police department budget. The highway budget is $400,000. The highway department has been running at below a minimum request for a long, long time. And remember last year, the highway department had thought about adding an extra person because we've been cutting back on their personnel. And they finally said, it's not that we don't agree that that's a good expenditure, it's just that there's no place for the money to come from unless we want to raise taxes. If we want to raise taxes, then you can do a lot of things. But there's the amounts of money are just too big. There's no other place really to get it.
So, John, with your vast experience in town and everything else, and knowing all the other departments and the school department, do you see that now might be the time for an override across multiple departments, for multiple departments?
Well, we have to keep in mind, I think, that there's a school building committee, which 2 members of the school committee are on, and the superintendent is on. And probably this fall, we'll come to the town to discuss financing for that. The figures that are being discussed in the school building committee now are probably going to require someplace between 6% and 10% increase in property taxes in order to pay for the construction of the new school. So, and there I'm talking a 10% increase is about $750,000 a year. So that's going to be, and that'll be most likely be a 30-year override. So that's a big competitor for funds.
Most definitely.
The planning board is, I think, talking to the select board next week about the possibility of a sewer line extension. Funding for that is unlikely to be able to be paid for entirely by grants or betterments. And if something is needed there, then there's going to be an override required there. So there are a number of competing options for asking for override money. And the school, I think, is going to have to, the school committee to think about that in relationship to building a new school.
Yeah. No, that's fair information.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Someone needs to plug water. I know, man. Okay, moving back to our agenda. And Archie, thank you for staying.
Archie's not feeling well, so I'm going to send him home.
And so we'll go right to you, Dr. Houle, on your meet and greet.
Just a quick announcement that tomorrow night from 6:30 to 8 here in this room will be a meet and greet. Come when you can, leave when you have to. Kind of informal, just getting to know people, getting to know the community, and then getting to know me. So looking forward to it.
What time is it again?
6:30 to 8.
6:30 to 8 tomorrow evening.
Right here.
Right here.
I've been to East Meadow School. I went and visited all the classrooms there on Friday, and I'll be visiting the high school and West Street tomorrow.
Excellent. Exciting times.
Absolutely.
Anyone sign in for visitors' comments?
Just John.
Just John?
Just
Okay.
John.
Okay, so then we'll move past that then, I guess. Unless somebody wants to sign in now for any comments? Going once, going twice? Okay. The next thing is a vote on the superintendent search consultant firm. So over the past few weeks, we had a few vendors in, and I'd like to open this up for discussion, and then I would like a motion for one of the vendors or for none of the vendors or whatever. So let's open it up for discussion. So we had the Massachusetts School Committee Association out 2 weeks ago, I believe now. And so any comments on that other than, the one thing that really stood out to me was the 365 per session for them to come in and do, group sessions.
Focus groups?
Yeah, the focus groups. Because I pictured that adding up pretty quickly. If you think about one per school, if you went that way, plus any other focus group that we might have.
You think they might be negotiable, though?
I don't know. They didn't. They had their opportunity to say they were negotiable. I think didn't you? You might have asked specifically about the 365, and I would hope that if they were negotiable, they would have said, "Well, we can work that out."
Yeah.
I would have expected them to say, well, it's 365 on our brochures, but we're giving you a 20% discount or whatever, and then off that 365, we could maybe go 200 or something. So I think both organizations
But MASC had no fees for that.
Right.
Except for mileage.
They had no fees for that, except for the mileage for coming out here to do those focus groups. And if we planned it correctly, maybe we could get them done in a day or two. So that would help. And I believe their overall fee might have been a little cheaper, or roughly about the same price, wasn't it?
Without a discount, it was going to be a little lower than what the
Yeah.
MASC had. But overall, I think just they were both good consulting firms or consulting services to talk to. They both had strengths that they shared with us. What we saw, one of the things that actually hit us with NASDAQ was the fact that if we had gone, or if we would like to go in the direction of focus groups, it was a lot of money when you add it up, because their focus groups are not going to be huge focus groups. They're going to be limited number of folks. Then if you want to have multiple focus groups, each time you have to pay them $365, it adds up. And there were still some additional fees here and there as well that they could charge us, but their base fee was cheaper than what MASC had. with some discount that they were going to provide to us. As far as the presentations, however, I thought the MASC presentation was fuller. Almost some of the items that Glenn brought up were in anticipation of questions that would come from a committee like ours. They seem to be well aware of the regulations and financials and everything else as they were doing their search. It was pretty straightforward. In fact, he went to the extent of telling us whether or not this might be the best time for us to go and do the superintendent search. And he offered both options. Just you can do it now, or you can wait a little later, where the pool gets a little better, a little more attractive. On top of that, he answered to our questions pretty positively. One of them was based on our previous experience with the consultant that we had, and he was immediately open to the suggestion that if we told them, hey, we would like to work with you or somebody else, but not the individual we had last time, he said, that's your call. You're a member committee. We do whatever you want us to do, and we're going to go with that. So when we put everything together, I walked away from the MASC interview thinking that I had much more information. I was better informed. I knew what they were going to do for us. I really appreciated some of the details that NESEC provided with us as well, but I was not really feeling as well informed when the interview ended, even though we had some questions for Bill, right? Yeah. For Bill as well. So for that reason, my choice would be MASC.
I definitely really liked Glenn's presentation and his style. I wanted to say his style overall. Yeah.
Especially because he would be the one who would be working.
Right, and that's what
that would be the caveat.
We were told that.
And
yes.
And so
I think that would have to be part of the
yeah.
contract. His name specifically would be the lead.
Yeah, I just thought that he was truly willing to work with us, and just by offering us like menu choices almost and different things like that. Even though the other brochure did show some of that, but there was always some sort of cost associated with it.
But MASC also has a lot of free services that are available as well, and he offered, even if we went with the other contractor, that they allow us, so why?
They're still going to advertise for us and everything.
But it just makes more sense, even if you're paying a tiny bit more to begin with. It seems like without those focus group fees, we'd actually end up paying less, but then you have more resources available.
I also get the sense that they're more detailed in their data because they are MASC. MASC, yeah. So
I think that way.
I think that would be really helpful in getting community feedback, and they can.
Well, they have our data from last time too, so, and he was willing to share that, and I thought that was pretty important. So to at least go back to our previous data, I thought was probably somewhat helpful.
And what you're referring to is based on the conversations they had with the community, the focus groups that they held. They were willing to share that information with us with no cost because what they said.
It's ours.
Yeah, it's already ours. It belongs to us.
And maybe there's something that stands out in that information with this school committee that didn't stand out with the previous one or whatever. So.
So that everybody understands, especially folks who are going to hopefully watch this, both services provide a second option if the first search, let's say, does not result in the hiring of a superintendent. Right. They don't say, hey, we have to renegotiate. It's basically part of the contract in both cases. They restart it and then they do the search. In the case of MASC, again, the candor and the style came a little differently in that Glenn was saying, look, if you guys want to go ahead and do the search now, even though it might not be as fruitful based on past experience, don't just agree to the few choices that would bring to you. If you think that those are not the qualities or the individuals that you would like to work with, This is your school district. You make the decision. You tell us, no, we don't want them, and then it's our job to start over. So even the way he presented that option, regardless of the fact that they both had it, I thought it was well put. It provided some comfort.
And I really think, but this is going back 5 years, so my memory might be failing me, but I thought we had a pretty nice brochure too that we put together.
That was actually
for our superintendent, and it gave information about our town, the population, number of schools, just different types of information like that, and what we were looking for our district, what type of superintendent we were looking for.
We must have access to that here, right?
Yeah, or they also have it. I'm assuming so.
One last thing that I just remembered. If there are candidates coming from out of state, because the school committee associations or school board associations and then superintendent associations nationally, they first refer to each other's website, and because MASC puts these vacancies on their website, if there is a good candidate that would like to apply to this particular position from out of state, from out of Massachusetts, provided they are licensed to serve here, probably they would first go to the MASC website, MASS website, where they would find our information. So that actually provides another level of visibility to our job announcement. Or job.
Which we did have candidates from out of state last time. Matter of fact, one of our finalists.
Yes.
And
so just to put a motion out there, I'd like to make a motion to hire the services of MASC to assist us in our search for our next superintendent.
have a second.
Second.
Any discussion?
As long as we put that caveat in there.
But Glenn is our
Yes.
consultant.
Yes.
I think he said that he would be the primary.
He did say.
Yeah.
He said it.
He did say that
He
it would
said
be
it.
him.
Yes,
But he said
I
if we
don't-
only wanted him, that he would do it.
Because I think there's like all of 3 people or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah, and they're looking to hire
And
someone
one of
else.
them's retiring,
and
so
we just need to be clear.
yeah, that's who we're. I agree. I totally agree on that.
Okay.
No doubt, I agree on
Okay.
that.
And just to make it clear, as far as who we will not want to have as our consultant
Yeah.
as well, which you brought up.
Yeah. We can be very clear on that.
Yep.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Hi.
Unanimous. Okay. Thank you.
Would you
And
like me to reach out to?
please, Glenn,
Will do.
unless you want to do that, Jim, because you were. If that's up.
Well, what's our next step? We have to get him to come up with a contract proposal
Yep.
for us, right? And cost.
Okay. And so why
I'll
don't
talk
you
to
do
you
that?
after.
And then, one of the things that, depending on what we end up doing, Dr. Houle, moving forward, yes, this is another expense, but maybe we can split it out among 2 different budget years.
I would think so, because obviously you're going to do all your focus group and data gathering before you go out to advertise, so that you have a profile
So we might
of
be able
the
to do
candidate
that.
you want. So you could probably get that done within this fiscal year, and then the search proper.
I'm sure they'll
by the
work with
next
us on
fiscal
that.
year.
Yeah,
And I'm
so
sure
we might-
they'll work with us on
Yeah, so we might be able
doing
to.
it across.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not that we have the money in either one of those fiscal years, but
Yeah, we're going to do that. Got to borrow from somebody.
Is that or play the lottery? I guess.
and then once we bring Glenn in, I truly do want the school committee members to seriously think about who they want on the search committee. We'll have, I believe, 2 members. So please let me know your interests.
Is that what happens if all of us are interested?
We'll have to talk it out and figure it out.
We all won't be interested.
Right.
I put that out there now.
I can tell you, we won't all be interested.
What does that mean? mean, you won't be interested?
Not everyone will be interested.
Yeah, I kind of figured that. But
So not all 5.
right.
So less than 5.
Yes.
So we're already down.
Okay, but we'll only have 2 spots.
What was that show? The Gladiator? Just people will just
Arm
walk
wrestle.
I was
We can arm
thinking names out of
wrestle,
a hat,
we
but
can
if you
do-
want to go to Gladiator,
I'd rather do it.
entertainment. You know, just
I think whoever gets the short straw might be on it.
We could sell tickets and offset the cost.
yeah.
But I
So we
can
get
say
taken like that.
it's truly an honor to work on that type of committee. I can tell you that right now. It really is. You meet some very fascinating people, within our community, but even outside of our community. So think of it that way too. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, before you move on, just to kind of think a little bit about dates and whatnot. Obviously, we're going to meet next week.
Yep.
I would like to suggest that probably we meet again on the 13th of April and maybe see if we can get the selectmen and finance committee or some conglomeration thereof to meet with us to discuss FY16. The following Monday is Patriots Day.
Yeah, and I am like that week of the 20th. I really can't be accounted for.
Right.
So if we can do it.
But
before
I'm
vacation,
thinking
it'd
if
be
we could
good.
do that the 13th
I'm
and
Yeah.
then the 27th, hold your public budget hearing and vote your budget
So right before
that
the-
night
yeah.
so that we have a number to give to the town by May 1st. And then maybe somewhere within, if that's amenable to the committee, I can just say to Glenn, we're meeting every Monday except for the holiday
Yeah.
in April and see, when he might be able to come back out.
So we're doing the 6th, the 13th, the 27th.
Right.
Oh, that's 6.
Well, the 13th is what the
Is
select.
that good?
Yeah, it's good.
We don't know if they
I'm
meet
just thinking
on a
back to
Monday. Is that one of their Mondays? We don't know that, right?
I don't know, but again, I think,
Some of us going to have to get off
No
the
one
night.
ever said that.
Right.
Except for budget.
but I think,
And every
And
other
any
time.
other
And every other
thing.
time.
And the other issue that might come
conversations
up.
going at once.
Yeah.
I think I think when I raised this with Mark last week as putting it out there, I think he was interested in possibly getting the entire board of selectmen to come to the meeting. So even if the 13th were one of their meeting nights, and we said to them, would you be willing, meet here, and then give them a classroom if they want to go off and finish the rest of their business
Or we
somewhere
could go.
else.
Or we could go there.
Yeah, one or the other.
So that's the 13th?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll reach out to the 2 chairs about that then, and I'll also give Glenn the dates that we're going to meet in April so that he knows what they are and see what works with his schedule.
It would be actually nice for them to come here, only because we have been going to the select board meetings the last few years or whatever, and I have a feeling it's been years since some of them have actually been in these buildings. So I think it would be.
There. We'll invite them here first.
Absolutely.
I think it would
we'll
be
do
nice.
that.
I
We'll
think
do
it would
the
be
tea
nice.
and cookies. How's that?
Yeah.
Take them to the second floor with
getting
roots.
Yeah, we'll put them in one of the classrooms that has no ceiling tile. Has a couple of holes in the ceiling tile.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
And it's warmer here.
Really?
I don't know about that. Okay, 6th, 13th, and 27th.
And 6 or 6:30.
I'll say 6, but unless someone says differently.
6 is good.
6 is fine.
And I can just let Glenn know that those are the upcoming meeting dates, and as long as we can get a contract signed and whatnot.
27th is.
And I'll talk to him about splitting that up over 2 fiscal years.
That's going to be the budget hearing, right?
Yes.
The 27th
Yeah,
is the
so
budget
that
hearing.
would probably
So
not
it's-
be, well,
Well, I
it'd be a
think
bad meeting for Glenn to be at.
we still, yeah, but it
We'll
would
just set the
still
time.
Yeah,
open it up as a school committee, and we have a budget hearing with the school committee. And
right,
open it up
your
to the
public
town.
budget hearing, you actually just
Yeah.
go into session and you
Yeah.
do it for the purposes of a budget hearing and then
Yeah.
adjourn from that and go into a regular meeting at that point. Yep.
Okay. I think our next item is really an executive session. Okay, executive session. To move into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A and 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, as such discussion in open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the public body. The committee will not be returning to regular session. Roll call.
Anne Marie Everett, aye.
Deanne Payne Rakowski, aye. William McCourt, aye.
Jim Peters, aye.
Mike Leslie, aye.